Namaste and welcome to India Reads. I'm Pradeep. We are at chapter 2 of the Accidental Prime Minister. It's been a bit painful for me because I've already recorded one episode and I had not checked whether the mic was working or not. I had some earphones on, and so it's going to be me repeating the episode all over again, but it's the first time for you guys. Hopefully, I can get it better this time than the one that I posted yesterday and have pulled it down today. So let's get to chapter 2, getting to know Dr. Singh. Sometimes in life it's wise to be foolish. Raul Prebish to Manmohan Singh, 1969. I first met Manmohan Singh in early 1991 at his office in the University Grants Commission across the road from my own office at Times office on New Delhi's Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg. The Economic Times, where I was then associate editor, was to celebrate its 30th anniversary in March 1991. I was put in charge of producing a special supplement for the occasion. We decided that it would carry interviews with economists who had shaped policy during those 30 years. We picked Ken Raj, the doyen of Delhi School of Economics, consultant by both Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi, P.R. Brahmananda, who created a rival group dubbed the Bombay School of Economics, and Manmohan Singh, a disciple of Raj at the Delhi School, but one who had served the Indian government in important policy making capacities for two-thirds of the period that was our focus. His career had been brilliant by any reckoning. After studying economics at Punjab University, Manmohan Singh went on to secure an honours degree in economics from Cambridge University, followed a few years later by a doctoral degree from Oxford University. He then taught economics at his alma mater, Punjab University. Sometime in the early 1960s, his neighbor in Amritsar, the writer Mulk Raj Anand, took him to Delhi and introduced him to Nehru, who invited the talented young economist to join his government. Dr. Singh could not do so at that time since he was serving out a contract with his college, which had funded his studies abroad. In 1966, Dr. Singh, who had written his doctoral thesis on India's export trends and prospects, joined the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development in Geneva. However, 3 years later, India beckoned and Dr. Singh came home to join the faculty of the Delhi School of Economics at K. N. Raj's invitation. The Delhi School had acquired global prominence under Raj, and Dr. Singh became part of an enormously talented faculty that included Amartya Sen, Jagdish Bhagwati, and Sukhmoy Chakravarti. Taken aback by his promising colleague's decision, the head of UNCTAD, Raul Prebish, advised Manmohan Singh to stay back and not to return home. Manmohan explained to Prebish that the Delhi School appointment was a prestigious one and that he would not like to turn down an invitation from Professor Raj. "You're being foolish," Prebish admonished Manmohan, but then added thoughtfully, "Sometimes in life it is wise to be foolish." It was a line I heard Dr. Singh repeat many years later in his modest office in the Prime Minister's official residence on New Delhi's New Delhi's Racecourse Road, a small room that could accommodate just a table and two chairs, but overlooked a lovely lawn where peacocks strutted around. Faced with a veritable avalanche of advice urging him to drop the idea of pursuing the civil nuclear energy cooperation agreement with the United States, including from many of his closest aides, advice that he did not finally take, Dr. Singh said to me with a smile, "It is time again to be foolish." However, at our first meeting that afternoon in February 1991, I had no sense of what, if anything, was remarkable about Manmohan Singh. I was in awe of K.N. Raj, who had been my teacher, and I saw Dr. Singh as just another student of his who had spent most of his life in the government. True, he had held a series of important positions, including the economic advisor to the government of India, economic affairs secretary in the Union Finance Ministry, governor of the Reserve Bank of India, deputy chairman of the Planning Commission, and Secretary General of the South Commission, and had just demitted office as the advisor to Prime Minister Chandrasekhar. But I was not brought up to be overawed with authority. I was also less than reverential because of the world in which I grew up, lapped, lapped up with his. Both my father, whose term as Finance and Planning Secretary of Andhra Pradesh coincided with Dr. Singh's stint as the Secretary in the Ministry of Finance in Delhi, and my father in law, who had been in the Planning Commission, knew Dr. Singh well. Indeed, my father and Dr. Singh had several close friends in common, most importantly, K. N. Raj, the economist, Amrik Singh, the educationalist, and Mohit Sen, the communist. When I walked over across Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg and into the UGC office that day, I expected to meet an officious and self important bureaucrat, another VIP belonging to the Delhi Darbar. However, the first thing that struck me when I came face to face with Manmohan Singh was his gentle politeness. He greeted me warmly, got up from his chair, suggested that we sit on a sofa, and offered me a cup of tea. I switched on my tape recorder and began asking my questions. A few minutes into the interview, the tape recorder stopped working. Feeling a bit rattled, I tried shaking it, took the batteries out, and put them back in. But nothing helped. Dr. Singh was patient but gently warned me that he had a meeting to go and he was traveling over the next few days. He suggested that we try finishing the interview. When I was contemplating writing down the answers in longhand, it occurred to me that it would take me very little time to summon Mr. Anand, the stenotypist from ET, who duly arrived and wrote down Dr. Singh's replies in shorthand. At the end of the interview, Dr. Singh suggested that I show him the typed draft before it went to print. Since Dr. Singh was traveling, I managed to show him a draft only a week later. This he promptly returned with several changes made with a ballpoint pen and in a handwriting that was neat, legible, and compact. Requesting Dr. Singh to incorporate the changes and forward the file to my colleague who was handling the production of the special pages, I left Delhi on work. Early in the morning on 5th March, the ET special edition arrived at my doorstep. But even before I could open it, the phone rang. It was Manmohan Singh on the line. His tone was even, but his displeasure was sharply evident. You did not make the corrections that I asked you to, he said. I had added an entire paragraph that I don't find published. It was an important point I was making. This is highly irresponsible. I did not expect you to be so careless. He put the phone down even as I kept saying, Sorry, sir, I haven't seen the paper yet. This was the first of the two admonishments that I have received from Dr. Singh. The second was to come 16 long years later when he chastised me for crediting him with an important decision that the Congress party was eager to claim was Rahul Gandhi's idea. The mistake turned out to be the kind of embarrassing mix up that occasionally happens in newspaper. While Mr. Anand had done his job properly, the person making the page had accidentally downloaded and placed on the page the earlier uncorrected version of the interview. I was curious now to discover the contents of that additional paragraph that Dr. Singh had scribbled on to the draft and had been so upset to find missing in the printed version. It turned out to be his about his recent visit to South Korea and the important lessons India ought to learn from South Korea's model of development. He had pointed out that South Korea had invested in education and had an open economy, and India ought to do the same. It was only years later that I fully understood why Dr. Singh had been so upset at this omission. He was signaling at the relevance of his own views that he had articulated decades ago in his doctoral thesis on the importance of foreign trade and greater openness to the world economy in India's own development. No Indian policymaker had till then held South Korea up as a role model. In fact, in the mid 1980s, Professor Raj had a high profile spat with Bela Belasa, the Hungarian economist at the World Bank, in which he disparaged the so called lessons to be learned from East Asian growth experience, which Belasa was advocating. Indian trade economists like myself were taught to poo poo the relevance of the Korean experience for India on the grounds that the strategies followed by small sized economies that had tied their fortunes to American power were not relevant for a large independent nation like India. In February 1991, weeks before he was unexpectedly summoned to become India's finance minister, Dr. Singh was once again drawing attention to his own views about trade and development. Indeed, Dr. Singh was always more open minded than his critics have painted him to be. Contrary to the mischievous remarks of some of them that he had been converted to economic liberalization after becoming finance minister, the fact is that he had always been an advocate of trade liberalization and a critic of export pessimism. This is now a discredited theory that India had little to supply on the world economy and therefore ought to reduce its demands on it. As he told me in his March 1991 interview, I was a critic of the export pessimism of the 50s, although I must say that there was some change in thinking after the foreign exchange crisis of 1957. If you recall, it was the second plan which made the assumptions relating to exports not being an option. At the time, textiles and engineering goods were the leading industries, and we must remember that in 1945, India was a leading textiles exporter, but we lost ground because we failed to modernize. On other grounds, the countries like South Korea, which came to the field only in the 50s, were able to modernize and emerge in leading textiles exporters. We missed the 60s boom because in 60s boom in trade because we believed that there was no scope for labor intensive techniques in the world market. We fail to recognize the scope for technological change and to evolve a trade policy suited for that purpose. There is inadequate recognition in our country that on a per capita basis, India is not well endowed with with natural resources, and that we have to be a major nation, major trading nation to fill the gap. Clearly, Dr. Singh wanted, through these comments and those accidentally omitted from the published interview, to bring his views to bear on the ongoing debate in India at the time on issues like trade, liberalization, and industrial policy. In fact, he had been moved out of the PMO where he had been advisor to Prime Minister Chandrasekhar because of the PM's more left-wing advisors were unhappy with the kind of policy advice that Dr. Singh was offering the PM. Sitting in the UGC, he was now keen on giving a clearer public expression to these views, and I had watched it. This was the last I heard from Dr. Singh till January 1991, when he became India's finance minister. Narasimha Rao took charge as the Congress party leader after Rajiv Gandhi's assassination in May 1991, in the midst of an election and a balance of payment crisis. He needed a finance minister who enjoyed international credibility and could negotiate a loan with the IMF. Rao's first choice was I.G. Patel, a former secretary in the Ministry of Finance who had returned to India after a stint as director of the London School of Economics. A critic of many of Indira Gandhi's policies, Patel had called for a bonfire of controls in an influential essay written in the 1980s. However, Patel chose not to return to public office and went into retirement in his hometown, Vadodara. Dr. Singh's name was then suggested to Narasimha Rao by P.C. Alexander, who had been Principal Secretary to Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. Alexander had called Dr. Singh and informed him that he was to become the finance minister. However, Dr. Singh either did not take the offer seriously or wanted to hear it directly from the PM. So he stayed at home until he was summoned by Narasimha Rao at a short notice to the swearing in ceremony at Rashtrapati Bhavan. On the day Dr. Singh assumed charge, I called his home and left a message congratulating him. That night, the phone rang just as I had finished dinner. Sanjaya, this is Manmohan. The new finance minister said, I received your good wishes. Thank you. We will meet after I have settled down. I was relieved that he had either forgotten the ET special edition fiasco or was now ready to forgive me for that lapse. It clearly helped that a finance minister handling a crisis needed to be on good terms with an economic journalist. For 6 months after that, I enjoyed a cordial equation with him. Those were exciting and heady days for an economic journalist in India. It all began with the two-step rupee devaluation on first 1 July and 3 July, dubbed by Dr. Singh and the Reserve Bank's Deputy Governor C. Rangarajan as a hop, skip, and jump. Many policy announcements followed, including the end of India's famous license permit Raj, and its web of bureaucratic controls was popularly described, and across the board reduction of import tariffs. Dr. Singh's first budget speech on 24th July 1991 concluded with the now famous quotation from Victor Hugo: "No power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come." He went on to say, I suggest to this august house that the emergence of India as a major economic power in the world happens to be one such idea. Let the whole world hear it loud and clear. India is now wide awake and we shall prevail. We shall overcome. At ET, we were generally supportive of the government's initiatives, though some of us remain skeptical of the likely impact on growth and welfare of economic liberalization measures. I also knew from my conversations with the then chief economic advisor to the union government, Deepak Nair, a former colleague from our time during in the mid 90s on the faculty of economics at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, that there were internal differences within the finance ministry on what need to be done. Even on matters such as exchange rate policy, there were divisions, with C. Rangarajan and Y. Venugopal Reddy, then a joint secretary in the Union Finance Ministry, opting for more graduated changes in the exchange rate regime, while others like Montague were votaries of the Big Bang approach. These differences found their reflection in the wider public space. There was a lively debate, for instance, in the press on the merits of the gradual reform versus Big Bang reforms. My columns reflected the views of the gradualists and therefore attracted those who agreed with me. One such person was Charles Clift, a junior diplomat in the British High Commission in Delhi. Charles had done his PhD in economics from Sussex University, and his doctoral supervisor was Biplab Dasgupta, a Marxist economist who later returned to India to become a CPIM member of parliament. He died in 2005. Charles told me that every document and letter sent by the Indian finance minister to the IMF was circulated among all the IMF directors, and the British had a policy of sending the papers dealing with the program country to their diplomatic outposts in that country. This meant that every letter Dr. Singh wrote to the IMF's managing director, Michael Camdesis, found its way back to Delhi to the British High Commission. Given his loyalty to Biplab, who was a CPIM member, who, as a CPIM member, would have been only too happy to have the finance minister's dealings with the IMF subject to public scrutiny. Charles had no qualms about handing over some of those documents to me. It helped that Biplab had once mentioned to him that I, as a former member of the Communist Party of India Marxist during my days at the University of Hyderabad, was a fellow traveler. Due to Charles' generosity, I was able to write some interesting news reports and columns. On the eve of Dr. Singh's second budget in February 1992, the Indian Express published some of Doctor's letters to the IMF suggesting that the budget secrets had been leaked to the fund. I called Charles and asked him if he had all the documents cited in the Express report. He promptly handed them over to me. The Economic Times was therefore quickly able to take the story forward, and Dr. Singh had no choice but to table all the documents in the Parliament on 26 February, shortly before he presented his budget. On the morning of the 29th, the day of the budget presentation, ET carried a front page piece by me titled Loan Terms: How Many Steps Beyond the Fund. My analysis based on the documents supplied by Charles highlighted the government's commitment to the IMF and argued that the government's sovereignty was compromised, like the IMF staff, since the IMF staff was already privy to budgetary policy. I reported that Dr. Singh had already assured the IMF and the World Bank that India would, among other policy measures, decontrol the price of steel till then fixed by the government. This was a decision awaiting cabinet approval. When Dr. Singh stood up to read his budget speech in Parliament, the CPM leader Somnath Chatterjee waved a copy of the ET. He charged the finance minister with leaking the budget and sought to move a privilege motion against the government. Dr. Singh was not amused. Rising to present his budget to the parliament, Dr. Singh was constrained to respond to these charges, stating that as a founder member of the IMF and the World Bank, India had a right to borrow from them. Dr. Singh explained, as lenders, the IMF and the World Bank, are required to satisfy themselves about our capacity to repay loans. And this is where conditionality comes into picture. All borrowing countries hold discussions with these institutions on the viability of the programs for which assistance is sought. We also have held such discussions. However, he assured Parliament, the conditions we have accepted reflect no more than the implementation of the reform program as outlined in my letters of intent sent to the IMF and the World Bank, and are wholly consistent with our national interests. The bulk of the reform program is based on the election manifesto of our party. There is no question of the government ever compromising our national interest, not to speak of our sovereignty. He refused to meet me after that. During the months that followed, I continued to write on the government's economic policies, but his doors remained closed to me. My access in the finance ministry was restricted to joint secretaries like Y.V. Reddy, Yelluri Narayana, and Divuru Subbarao, all from Hyderabad, and Deepak Nair. When Deepak exited the ministry later that year, I did a full page analysis in the ET on the intellectual differences within the government, especially between Deepak and Montek, with the title The Importance of Dissent. I was told Dr. Singh had been irritated by my piece and had quipped to someone that the Ministry of Finance was not a debating society. In early 1993, shortly after I had moved from ET to the Times of India as its business and economics editor, Dilip Padgaonkar, the paper's editor, asked me to seek an appointment with the finance minister and interview him for the paper. I confessed to Dilip that I was unlikely to secure an appointment from Dr. Singh. He offered to make the call and managed to get him to agree to the meeting. When Dilip mentioned during the phone conversation that I would be accompanying him and we would like to interview him for the Times, Dr. Singh fell silent. He then told Dilip that he could not trust me to report his views accurately and recall the ET at 30 special supplement fiasco. It was only after Dilip assured him that he would read the interview before it went to press that he agreed to meet us. When we arrived the next day at Dr. Singh's North Block office, I tried to hide between Dilip and be as unobtrusive as possible. To my surprise, Dr. Singh walked up to me, placed his hand on my shoulder, and with a signature smile asked how I was. Dilip was visibly relieved to see that his business and economics editor was now in good terms with the finance minister, and the interview went on smoothly. Years later, working for Dr. Singh, I discovered that misleadingly friendly smile was especially reserved for his critics and opponents. Leaders of the left front, editors who had been critical of him in their columns, and colleagues in the Congress party known for planting stories against the PM in the media were all greeted with that disarming smile. The very next day, I received a call from the finance minister's office inviting me to dinner that night. I found myself at an intimate gathering in the private dining room of a five-star hotel. Around the table at which I was seated next to Dr. Singh were only four other guests. The then Commerce Minister P. Chidambaram, Montek Isher, and the chairperson of Hindustan Times, Shobana Bhartiya, who I knew as we sat down that I had been rehabilitated. As a journalist, I had heard stories of how Indira Gandhi would suddenly win over a detractor with a smile or a special gesture. As a communist in my youth, I had also heard stories of how Stalin had invited a colleague home for dinner before he went off to send before he was sent off to Siberia or just shot dead. Dr. Singh was certainly not Stalin, nor was he an Indira. But I felt that he might have learned a lesson or two about winning friends and disarming critics from her. Later, when I went to work with him closely, I saw how much Dr. Singh imbibed from watching the prime ministers he had worked for. While he did play favorites by meeting journalists and others who were nice to him and refusing appointments to those he did not like, he would floor critics every now and then with the impeccable courtesy. He also learned to value differences of opinion among his advisors. As PM, he would listen to all opinions, only rarely disagreeing with anyone in meetings, so as to not discourage free expression and then doing what he felt needed to be done. An important lesson he seemed to have learned from his predecessor was never to reveal his mind on policy issues till it was absolutely necessary to do so. The dinner was a turning point in our relationship. By then, I had tempered my own views and become more appreciative of his policies. He too had understood the need to build bridges of his critics, while Narasimha Rao stood like a rock behind him and offered unstinted political backing for his policies in public. He would privately urge his finance minister to be more accommodating of the Congress party's political concerns, and Dr. Singh was clearly learning to soften his stance. Even as he learned the political ropes, he found it hard to handle vociferous public attacks. In August 1991 and March 1992, Dr. Singh had offered to resign the first time when the government was accused of favoring a bank with dubious credentials, and the second time when some of his cabinet colleagues, led by Arjun Singh, attacked his policies. As a staunch Gandhi family loyalist and a prime ministerial aspirant, Arjun Singh was inimical to Rao, as he later would be to Dr. Singh when he became PM. Both times, Narasimha Rao backed Dr. Singh to the hilt and told him that he should not take such attacks personally because they were, in fact, directed against the PM. However, in December 1993, when Dr. Singh offered to resign a third time after a parliamentary committee criticizing the finance ministry's handling of a stock market and banking sector scam, Rao was annoyed. He had enough of Dr. Singh's resignation dramas. Narasimha Rao's aide PVRK Prasad, an IAS officer from Andhra Pradesh and a relative of mine, who also doubled up as the PM's press secretary, gave me a blow by blow account of the drama around that resignation episode. Prasad told me that Rao did not want to reach out directly to Dr. Singh to get him to withdraw his resignation, but he was wary of moves made by both Pranab Mukherjee and Chidambaram to become finance minister in case Dr. Singh quit. According to Prasad, Narasimha Rao told him that since Dr. Singh was not a politician, he had to be handled differently. I cannot send a politician to persuade him, Narasimha Rao told Prasad. Even if I send one, he will not relent. Prasad was then deputed to win over Dr. Singh. Prasad had been PV's personal secretary when the later was a chief minister of Andhra Pradesh in 1971. He had run errands for Dr. Rao, handling many tricky issues, and the PM trusted him. Prasad had to meet Dr. Singh several times to persuade him to withdraw his resignation. Finally, recalls Prasad, he went to Dr. Singh's home and had a long conversation with him in the presence of his wife Gosharan Kaur. Prasad thinks that it was a nudge from her that finally persuaded Dr. Singh to go meet Rao and sort out the matter, ending his resignation drama. I had reported most of this in the Times of India. Dr. Singh was aware of my proximity to Rao and Prasad and also knew that the Prime Minister often asked my family to draft his speeches. These factors may have also prompted Dr. Singh to be warmer with me and over time to trust me. In 1995, I had the opportunity to discover many other facets of the Prime Minister's personality. I had covered the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank at Madrid, an event that was more special than usual that year because the fund and the bank were also celebrating their 50th anniversary. Dr. Singh, who had led the Indian delegation, was in his element. By then, he was a celebrated finance minister who had won several international awards. I noticed his popularity among fellow finance ministers and watched many of them engage him in lengthy uh, lengthy conversations. When he addressed the fund bank meetings, he spoke with confidence and authority and was heard with respect. His views prevailed in discussions on development assistance and proposals for opening new lines of credit for developing countries. Despite his growing confidence in addressing international gatherings, he was careful. I discovered when it came to handling issues that could get him to trouble at home. The Sindhi Association of Spain had decided to host a reception one evening in honor of the Indian finance minister, to which I was also invited. On the day of the reception, I ran into Prakash Hinduja at the venue of the fund bank meetings, and he was engaged in a serious conversation with the finance minister of Iran, a country with which the businessman and his family had strong connection. Hinduja recognized me and invited me to a party that evening in honor of Dr. Singh and that he said he was hosting. I told him that I had already committed to attending an event hosted by the Sindhi Association. Same thing he said blithely. We are the Sindhi Association. I casually mentioned this encounter to Dr. Singh when I ran into him later that afternoon. He became worried, called the Indian ambassador and advised or whether or not he should go to that dinner, and finally went only after being assured that it was indeed the Sindhi Association that was hosting the event and the Hindujas would not be playing host. Dr. Singh was squeamish about associating with the Hinduja brothers, rich Sindhi businessmen based in Europe who were accused at that time of being middlemen in the Bofors gun deal, the case of a long running political scandal. Ironically, years later, when Dr. Singh was negotiating the nuclear deal with the US and had to keep a line open to Iran while reaching out to the US senators and congressmen, it was only the Hinduja brothers, legally cleared now by the Bofors charges, who played a key role in winning support for India both in Washington, D.C. and Tehran. At the Congress defeat in the After the Congress defeat in the general elections of 1996, Dr. Singh, still a member of the Rajya Sabha, became involved in the activities of the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, a developmental organization set up by the Gandhi family. Abid Hussain, a retired civil servant from Hyderabad who had served as India's ambassador to the United States, took charge of the RGF and involved me in the academic activities of its sister organization, the Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Contemporary Studies. This kept me in continued contact with Dr. Singh, whom I met often at lectures, seminars, and lunches that Hussein hosted. Now that he was no longer finance minister, he had more time on his hands, especially when parliament was not in session. Our interactions became more conversational. I even turned him for advice that I knew would be sound. When I decided to take a sabbatical from journalism from 1997, Dr. Singh advised me to join the Research and Information System for Non-Allied and Other Developing Countries, of which he was the chairman. It was again on his advice that I moved from RIS to the Indian Council of Research on International Economic Relations, where Isher Aluwalia had just taken over as the institute's director. It was Dr. Singh who encouraged me to study India's relations with the East and Southeast Asian economies, a subject that had remained close to his heart over the years. And I wrote a paper on the importance of trade with ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian nations, countries for India. When Dr. Singh became chairman of the governing council of the India Habitat Center in 1997, he drew me into IHC's activities. As a result, a plum assignment fell into my lap. I joined a team that included climate change scientist R.K. Pachauri and others that tasted food prepared by the applicants for catering licenses at the IHS various restaurants. In 1999, when the Congress party picked up Dr. Singh as a candidate for South Delhi Lok Sabha constituency, I joined the Friends of Manmohan group set up by Ishar Aluwalia, G.S. Bhalla, and other academics to campaign door to door for him. My daughter and I would walk around the neighborhood distributing pamphlets. Sadly, Dr. Singh lost that election by close to 30,000 votes to a party to the BJP's Vijay Kumar Malhotra, a considerably less distinguished political personality. His views on the massacre of some 3,006 in Delhi by Congress party activists and goons after Indira Gandhi's assassination in 1984 became a subject of controversy. While he condemned the killings unequivocally, the fact that he blamed both the Congress and the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh (RSS) for them did not go down with either, nor was his argument appreciated by Sikh voters. Delhi's Sikh community had in fact been grateful for the RSS for protecting Sikh families from the wrath of mobs attacking them, often led by local congressmen. Their anger was reserved wholly for the Congress. The Congress, on the other hand, was also upset with Dr. Singh's stance because it had pretended all along that the killing of the Sikhs after Indira's assassination was a spontaneous expression of popular anger rather than an organized pogrom. In attempting to take a principled position on the massacre without frontally attacking his own party, Dr. Singh ended up satisfying nobody. But Dr. Singh's family and close friends were convinced that his defeat was also in part due to internal sabotage and blamed the local leaders of the Congress party for doing little to get him elected. Perhaps some of the congressmen had already suspected by then that Sonia was grooming Dr. Singh as the future head of government and hoped to nip this plan in the bud. In any event, the campaign run mainly by his friends did not succeed and the race was lost. Dr. Singh was never to contest in another Lok Sabha election, preferring to enter parliament through a less turbulent the Rajya Sabha. The Delhi defeat left a scar on his family's memory. While Dr. Singh never discussed this with me, his family members did on several occasions, referring to this episode as an experience that left them with a sense of betrayal. Despite the fact that I got to know Dr. Singh well over the years, he continued to remain an enigma. A man of few words, he almost never engaged in a conversation of private or intimate nature. While he found it easier to talk shop, policy, or current affairs, he was rarely animated. And when I began to work for him, I would often see him sitting quietly or even awkwardly with visitors and betraying very little emotion. He had no gift for small talk. When obliged to interact with relatives during a visit to Kolkata or Amritsar or with old friends in Geneva, it seemed Dr. Singh did not quite know what to say to them, and it was left to Mrs. Kaur to keep the conversation going. Amusingly, even with his fellow economists who were his friends like Jagdish Bhagwati and I.G. Patel, he would be happy to let them do most of the talking. In a moment of frankness, Dr. Singh narrated a typical tale of his diffidence to Mark Tully, the legendary BBC correspondent in India. When Tully interviewed him for the Cambridge University Alumni magazine, Dr. Singh told me that as a student of St. John's College, he would get up early in the morning before his fellow students to finish bath because he felt shy about going into the common bathing rooms with his turban off and his hair tied up. Since hot water was not available at that hour, Dr. Singh chose to bathe in cold water, justifying this to his friends on health grounds as a way of fighting his common cold. His shyness, however, often made him appear lacking in warmth and emotion. Successful politicians are Janus phase. They know when to be withdrawn and cold and when to be warm and expressive. The Villiers among them make the switch between these two persons in a flash. Dr. Singh was not capable of such swift transformations. He may well have learned the art of disarming his critics, but he could never create the illusion of intimacy that journalists crave in their interactions with the powerful. Worse, he seemed to find it hard to be genuinely expressive. I always wondered how much of his shyness was a defense mechanism acquired during a quiet childhood when difficult childhood when after his mother's death he had to live with his uncle's family because his father was rarely at home. Since his uncle and aunt had their own children to take care of, the young Manmohan was left to his own devices. Dr. Singh had happy memories of his student and teaching life in Amritsar, but I noticed that he rarely spoke about his childhood in Ga. Working with him in the PMO, I discovered his introverted nature extended to his family as well. His daughters would say that they did not know their father's mind on many issues because he kept his work and family life in two separate, large, watertight compartments and rarely gave the expression of his thoughts, his desires or frustration even at home. As Mrs. Kaur once put it to me, he swallows everything, he doesn't spit out anything. At work, spoke even less than at home. His public silences, for which the media would often chastise him, were only an extension of his private ones. In formal meetings with the visiting heads of government, he had a prepared brief that he often memorized like a good student and followed. In cabinet and official meetings, he became notorious for his silences. He would often he would mostly listen and then say a few words if he wished to offer a view. Mostly, his style was to allow everyone to have their say and then take a decision on fire, rather than stating his own views explicitly. He was happy if he could provoke his interlocutors into talking so that he could himself sit back and listen. But he would ask questions, and those questions sometimes revealed his mind. Over time, as he became bolder as PM, he devised his new strategy. If he agreed with the views of a person in a meeting, he would give that person more time to speak while cutting short those whose views he did not share. Sometimes he would ask a person to speak knowing fully well what his views were and that these were not shared by many around the table. That was a signal for others to fall in line. And while he adopted all these strategies, he himself rarely spoke in an assertive manner. Over time, his silences and his overt shyness seemed to be more a strategy that they were probably than the habits they were probably been to begin with. When I entered the PMO, I would when I entered the PMO, I was aware of Manmohan Singh's shyness, and I knew in order to be a successful media advisor communicating on behalf on his behalf to the media, I would have to improvise. It would be easy for me to be his eyes and ears, which he wanted me to be. But when I would join the PMO, the tough part would be to be his voice. With this, we come to the end of chapter two. A lot of interesting stuff, lots of tidbits, lots of important anecdotes that we can unpack from here. The first is the story of Sanjaya Baru's first meeting with Dr. Manmohan Singh, which is way back in 1991 when Sanjaya Baru was working for the Economic Times, and Dr. Manmohan Singh was a well-renowned economist who was working in the Delhi School of Economics. The Delhi School of Economics was headed by a very well-known economist, Dr. Raj, uh, and the crux of why Sanjaya wanted to interview Dr. Manmohan Singh was that he was preparing. It was his 30th anniversary of the Economic Times, and they were speaking to a lot of leading economists who had shaped the policy in that period, which was the 30 years that the Economic Times had existed till then. And Dr. Manmohan Singh was one of the important economists who had a certain role in shaping the economic policy. While Sanjay did not really respect him, and he saw him only as a student of Dr. Raj, he he had his own biases before he met Dr. Manmohan Singh, and he realized that when he met Dr. Manmohan Singh, those biases were completely unfounded. Manmohan Singh was quite open, and he offered him a cup of tea. He had a fairly good interview. The tape with which he was recording the interview stopped because the batteries died. Um, Manmohan Singh was patient with him, but told him that it won't be possible for him to, continue the interview later as he was leaving town that day. And so Sanjay gets his stenotypist to come and take the interview in longhand. There was an understanding that Sanjay and Manmohan Singh had that the interview, when the final draft was ready, it would be shared with Manmohan Singh, which he promptly did. And Manmohan Singh gave his inputs in a neat, legible handwriting of adding some more important portions which he felt were important to the interview. Finally, when the interview came out, Dr. Manmohan Singh had called up Sanjay, and that's when it took Sanjay by surprise because the important points that Dr. Manmohan Singh had written down to be included in the interview were missed out, and these were points that he wanted to share because uh, he had a firm belief in those ideas. And what were those ideas? See, as a doctoral thesis, he had written about India's economic policies to be shaped by its understanding of different economies, and he had in during the interview added the paragraph about his experience in South Korea and the economic lessons that he learned from there. And this was important to them because this was going against the grain of most Indian economists who would not look at Eastern economies because they felt that Eastern economies were tied too much to the US economy, and therefore there was nothing for us Indians to learn from them in terms of framing our economic policies. So this is something that he wanted to go against the grain and wanted to advise economists to look at, and this kind of was botched up by Sanjaya's team. So this is one of the first admonishments that he had received from Dr. Manmohan Singh. But subsequently, uh, he built a rapport with Manmohan Singh, and he Manmohan Singh seemed to have forgiven him about the lapse of the ET edition, and he built a relationship. And this give and take kind of between a finance minister and an economic journalist kind of got Sanjaya a good deal in terms of understanding the economic policies of India and reporting them fairly. They reported on the government policies, and this was a good uh, give and take relationship that they had until it reached when a stage when Dr. Manmohan Singh's letters to the IMF were leaked out to Sanjaya through the British High Commissioner in India because he felt Sanjaya's communist leanings. He he related to Sanjay's communist leanings, and he kind of leaked out all the discussions, all the writings that Dr. Singh had written to the IMF, and which Sanjay used very well in all his articles for the Economic Times, and therefore this kind of sowed the relationship. And Dr. Singh did not invite him for interviews. He no longer had the access that he used to have with Dr. Singh, and so when Sanjay kind of moved from Economic Times to the Times of India, there was an opportunity for the Times of India to interview Manmohan Singh, and uh, Sanjay told the editor of the Times of India that it's unlikely that he would be welcome at Dr. Manmohan Singh, but the editor said, "Let me give it a try." And eventually, when the meeting happened, he realized that Dr. Manmohan Singh had been very kind and courteous and very gentle and warm with him. This is something that he observed and was shocked at. Later, many years later, when he started working with Dr. Singh um, on a regular basis, that's when he realized that this is the nature of Manmohan Singh, where he would be warm and courteous with the people he did not like. He kind of kept his enemies closer, and so he kind of connected this much many years later. Then he goes on to talk about Dr. Manmohan Singh's general attitude, or the fact that he was very shy as a person, and he revealed in one of his interviews to Mark Tully, the celebrated BBC journalist, on how as a young child he would get up very early in the morning in his college and have a shower because he did not want to open out his turban and show his long hair to his fellow students, which meant that early morning they would not have hot water, and he used to have bath in really cold water of the Delhi winters also. So then Sanjay kind of goes on about how the shyness was something that was there in Dr. Manmohan Singh's character. He would hardly speak much, even in gatherings with his family in Kolkata and Amritsar, or with his friends in Geneva. He would rarely talk shop with anybody at home, and even when he had the opportunity of talking shop with his friends and fellow economists, he would let them do the talking. This, however, as a behavior started becoming his strategy in later years as a minister, and as a prime minister, he would let others do the talking, and he would take decisions on the file. Later, as a strategy, what he started doing is he let people whose views he knew were towards a certain direction, which were in line with his decision, let them talk a lot, so that anybody else who uh, had opposite views understood that he's letting them talk because that his decisions are going to be in line with that. These are very good learnings for Sanjaya, because he could understand the character of Dr. Singh and understand the dynamics and build a working relationship with him. And he also sums up, he ends the chapter with saying that as a communications advisor, he realizes that Dr. Singh wanted him to be his eyes and ears, whereas actually his challenge was that for such a shy person, he wanted to be his voice, and that's how he ends the chapter. This is a very interesting chapter, and I got to learn a lot more. I've seen the movie, and now I realize that there is a lot of granularity in his understanding of Manmohan Singh, and his respect for Manmohan Singh, and his understanding of Manmohan Singh, which obviously were not captured well in the movie because the movie was commercial. I'm looking forward to the other new chapters, and we will see soon. Thank you. Take care. Bye.